Okay, so this video is super important because this changed everything for me. My whole perception of how to run a business, my ability to scale, my results, everything came from discovering this. And it's super important, and it ties in with why you shouldn't do refurbs, why you shouldn't do DIY, why you shouldn't be reconciling bank statements, all that stuff. And the sooner you adopt this principle, the quicker you will scale. Now, just because you're the business owner and entrepreneur doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take the lead role. So I will point that out. However, most people do take the lead role, and they do tend to, at least for the first year, 2 years, take that lead role, but it doesn't always have to be. So if you do maybe have another job and you need someone else to take the lead role to continue the business moving forward, then that's something to think about as well. So in brief, my business has a ethos of, so my business ethos is acquiring, I know I spelled that wrong, right? Acquiring property for cash flow. Okay, that is the number one goal of my business, is acquiring property for cash flow. Now, what do we need to do to acquire property for cash flow? So within this here, we then have different, let's see if I can just change the color on this. No, maybe. Yeah, cool. So acquiring property for cash flow. So within this, how do we acquire property for cash flow? So we need to be going on viewings. We need to be making offers. We need to be researching property. Viewings, offers, research. That is pretty much it in terms. Probably here we could add in relationships. So research, viewings, offers, relationships. That, doing all that acquires property. Okay, so research, viewings, relationships, offers. Now there are other components that then feed into that. So for example, we might have here, we might have obviously marketing, lead generation. That's obviously going to feed into the viewings. We might have in the research section, for me, is a bit of a sort of in-out sort of section. So, you could have like portal scraping and stuff like that. Just outside of that core element, you've got your marketing, and then we've got, viewings, offers, research, marketing. You've got then we've obviously got operations, we've got setups, we've got, management. I guess that falls in operations slightly. We've got, what else? We've got operations, setups, management, marketing. We've got accounts, and at first you have to be everything. And what happens is, as you scale, all these blue elements become more of a focus than the red elements. And ultimately you stop scaling because you're not getting on enough viewings a week. You're not making enough offers a week. You're not building enough relationships a week. And that is natural when you start to get success and once you start to build your portfolio. And if you start scaling at pace, this becomes a bigger problem quicker, because all of a sudden you've got multiple setups to do. You've got multiple guests to handle. You've got multiple tenants to be checking in and doing viewings for. You've got, multiple handyman arrangements, maintenance that need to be done to either make sure your essays are tidy or whatever it might be. You get the picture. It's starting to drag you away from the viewings, the offers, the research. So figure out what your number one priority is for your business, and for me, that is this here, acquiring property for cash flow, acquiring property for cash flow. Nothing can get in the way of acquiring property for cash flow. That just has to be an absolute fundamental key to it all. Nothing can get in the way of acquiring property for cash flow. So if that is getting in the way, then you do need to be putting steps in place to be able to offset that, get those problems dealt with, make sure the business still operates efficiently, because ultimately, you know, without all these, the business doesn't really tick. You know, you kind of just go and acquire a lot of properties and then not do anything with them. So you have to make sure that the back end's in. But what I want you to do is, first and foremost, figure out what your true purpose is for your business. It might be the same as this. It more than likely will be. But what is your true purpose of your business? And then what are the tasks that need to be done to give you that true purpose of that business? And then what we need to be doing is figuring out how we go about setting ourselves up in terms of time-wise to be able to make sure that we're getting everything done and nothing is falling to the wayside. So yes, you're going to still have to do some operations. Yes, you're going to still have to maybe do some marketing. Yes, you're maybe still going to have to do some other things, but really 95% of your time needs to be spent on that number one thing. And then the rest of it is split. You know, 5%, you might have 2% towards marketing, you might have 2% towards some other things, you know. So don't waste too much time on the operations. Figure out who can do the operations. And at this stage, you might think, well, I can't afford staff, I can't afford this. Hire a VA on a, you know, when she works, gets paid sort of basis. You don't need to be building teams of employees. You can be building teams of consultants. They get paid for the work they do, and that's it. So if there's work, they get paid. If there's no work, they don't get paid. But allowing them to do that work and take it off your plate allows you to focus on this. And ultimately, this is how you're going to scale. And you'll scale quickly if you adopt this mindset quickly. So, you know, become the number one person. And as I said earlier, if you're 9 to 5 and you can't be that number one person, then who can you get into that number one role? You might have to pay them a salary. It might have to be an employed role, but they then get targets on the head, and their number one job is finding properties for cash flow. You know, so if I now have actually pretty much stepped out of that role, and I have other people in the business who are in that role, that is their number one focus, is finding properties for cash flow. So, you know, I've got sources in the business, finding properties for cash flow. That's the key. So what I've done is I've not relinquished the role. Ultimately, I still make the decisions on the final offers that go to the agents and, you know, balancing the books and the money and all that sort of stuff. But they are out there doing the work to bring the deals to me. So I am leveraging my 95% by using, I've got 3 at the minute, 3 different people feeding in deals for me to be able to make those decisions. Now, what I do with my other time is split in terms of generating more revenue for the business. So it's probably come away from that acquiring property for cash flow ethos a bit, but it's all focused on generating more revenue for the business. So, you know, how can we get better at things? How can we cut costs? What other revenue streams can we bring in? You know, working on, you know, the academy, for example, that's another revenue stream. Obviously, my time needs to go towards coaching, you know, so I am just basically leveraging time, but the core fundamental business is acquiring property for cash flow. So I need to make sure that if I wanted to do all this other stuff to generate revenue down here, that this wasn't ever affected. And therefore, there's a lot of squiggles on here, that 95% of time was still getting put in some form of another for acquiring properties for cash flow. So have a good think about it. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to really have a think about what your number one business ethos is, what your number one business ethos is. I'd like you to post that in the group, and then I'd like you to identify the person that is going to do that. And I'd like you to identify what tasks that's going to mean you need to get rid of. And if you can pop that in the group, we'll have a bit of a chat about it and just bounce a few ideas off everyone, and hopefully we can get you some more support around that as well. Because the minute you understand this and you set it out and you stick to it, the quicker you're going to scale.